Many thanks for the presentation. Don't be shocked by the lot of initiatives I did, but I'm living for a longer time, therefore they have to do something in this time. I think I will be a little bit of a contrast program to what was presented to you today and also yesterday, because I'm trying to give a certain political approach to the background, what you are doing here. I think, first of all, I want to say, and that's not very new to you, we are in a tremendous, impressive time of changes. And especially to be said in Berlin, I think it has started in 1989, and that is changing totally our background and all the efforts, also for what was presented to you, tourism, and so on and so on. What do I mean by this? This tremendous change was, as I grew up, the world was divided between East and West, especially in Europe, and there were not so many changes after the big changes of the First World War and the Second World War. I think it was comparatively stable, but not too much devoted to democracy. I give you one figure in comparison. The foundation of the United Nations in San Francisco, 1945, there were 48 states present. Again, 48 states present. I think today we are coming closer to 200. Here you can see what impressive development is happening, and I think I'm not a prophet, but I want to predict we will go beyond 200 because I think some representatives are present here. What was done by around the subcontinent India, what was done by this separation of Bangladesh to Pakistan, what is happening now in Sudan, I think it is a continuous story. Is it splitting all the states or whatever does it mean? No, I think it is a process where more kind of identity feeling is coming up. The feeling who I am and who are the others, and that has some consequences by the model of the nation state. I want to say a contrast program. I think I'm really convinced, and the European integration is an example for, that the consequence of this splitting off of even more nation states will lead to more regional cooperation, because this is the only chance. I think if you are looking in a general overview, on the one side, politically, we are dividing. On the other side, globalization, technology, research, economic development is leading to more cooperation. I think that's a contrast program of our time in which we are living. I think one example is running through all these last 2 years, the problem of the financial markets and the economic development. Here you can see, and I may say it as a European and coming from a member state of the European Union, the lack of capacity of the governments of the nation states to deal with these problems. Why? They are not able to create a global framework for the financial market. Because I think every government of the nation state is looking in favor of my country, the others are looking in favor of their country, and they are not coming together. And for those who are working globally, maybe those who are doing a lot of nonsense also in the financial market, they are the winners of this play, but the payers are you, the taxpayers, and so on in consequence. That has to be said quite straight, and we are amidst this development. I want to close here, because here we can do a long discussion. Now a little bit focus to the responsibilities I had to do, especially concerning Central, Eastern, and Southeastern Europe. That means the Balkans. I think what has happened, beginning with 1989, is a tremendous change, which is not yet finished. The downfall of big empires. The Soviet Union was a big empire, without any doubt. The First World War ended some empires. Between the First and the Second World War, the colonial empires, and afterwards we are finished. With all these consequences existing here, coming up of new states, but also creating a lot of difficulties, because one has to be said, borders are very often artificial. I think there are no real borders. Okay, by the sea, I think here that's a clear border. But I think for the rest, if we are moving here on the earth where we are living, I think nearly every border is in a certain way artificial. It's backed by history for sure, by some developments, by conquering, and so on and so on. But I think here the problems are starting. What happened in 1989, the downfall of the Soviet Empire, falling into pieces, creating a lot of new states. In the neighborhood of Vienna, where I'm born, and at home, I think 27 new states were created. I'm very often discussing it with the citizens of Austria. I think they are not really aware who are new neighbors. Yesterday we had this joke mixing up Slovenia and Slovakia. I think that's completely new, because there was never a state of Slovenia and there was never a state of Slovakia beside a very short time during the Second World War. So far, I think they are newly created. You have a contrast program. Those who are living there are convinced we are Slovaks, we are Slovenes, and so on and so on. And you could listen to the conviction of the representatives about themselves. And that's quite clear, and that's quite okay. But I think being together, we are living out of this, that it is recognized, that it is known. And I think that's one of the difficulties. Maybe your generation can do it easier. I grew up where we had in school a big map on the front of the classroom, and I think there was a big red spot. That was the Soviet Union. And if somebody would have asked me this time who is living there, I would say the old Russians. In the meanwhile, we learned who were living and who are living there. The Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, the Tajiks, the Latvians, the Estonians, the Lithuanians, and. And even, and that's the problem of Vladimir Putin, I think they are also not all Russians in the Russian Federation, because you have Bashkirs, Tungus, Boyets, and. And also, again, I'm not a prophet, but a stronger feeling for your own identity is coming up all in these parts. That's a big problem with the Caucasus region that has created a war here. Besides what the Georgian government did and what the Russian government did, it's not my job to judge it. But here are feelings coming up quite similar, as it was mentioned concerning the development of Bangladesh. It is mixed between religion, culture, economic situation, social questions, and. That plays a very important role. And I think we are amidst this process. Again, and I'm repeating this, we will get more division. I think the variety plays a very important role. But the real request, and that's a request for your generation, how is unity looking for the future? Because otherwise we will have wars or tensions or difficulties, no economic and social stability, and so on and so on. You might ask, what has this to do with the aim of our meeting concerning tourism? Quite a lot. Because tourism is one of the possibilities to get a better knowledge of your neighbors. One very important sentence. The neighbor is not anymore those who are living, I think, next door to you. The globalization as a consequence, we are all neighbors in a certain way. And by mobility, it's really happening. Because I think you can see it by the participants here, what is happening. You can see it in our cities. I think it is more and more a mixture. And so far you have to know who is your neighbor. I'm able to live with him. What is his conditionality? What is he asking for? And so on and so on. That's of extreme importance. And tourism is a way to this. I want to exemplify it on an example. I think it was the downfall of Yugoslavia. I grew up in the sense, our neighbor in the south, they are all Yugoslavs. No problem. And it was easy to go because beside it was a communist country, but in a more soft way. And it was easy to go there. We didn't need any visas. The Yugoslavs didn't also need visas. That's a problem. I think the visa obligation was beside Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina, it's looking more optimistic, was now lifted. You have to imagine those who are living there, their parents could go everywhere in Europe without visa. Now the young generations there for a very long time, they needed visas. And they were standing in long lines at the embassies of the member states of the European Union with all the bureaucratic difficulties existing, and we need an additional paper. No, 12 papers are not enough. You have to bring the 13th, 14th, 15th, and so on and so on. I think that changes the conditions of life quite sure. But on the other side, something has to happen. The identity of the country has to be raised. I think to give a certain kind of campaigning that you are eager to go there. All the presentations you have seen were showing where can you go, what can you see, what is beautiful, what you have to know, what is the real background. It is a kind of advertisement which is happening. And so far, new states, there are old peoples living there, but they are new states. They have to create their own identity quite stronger. Here are a lot of possibilities. It's not only PR, as it is done here. I think it is done, for example, by sports, or it is done by literature, it's done by science, and so on and so on. I think that was really great showing Rabindranath Tagore being somebody from the Bengals. I think, take it typical. So far, I think those who were living in former Yugoslavia are now dividing themselves between, he was a famous Croat writer. No, he was a very famous Serbian poet. No, he was a very famous Montenegrinian musician, and so on and so on. Here you can see what it means. But you have also to elaborate it that especially in arts and in culture, things are in common also. Because nobody can develop quality in art not looking to other sides, to other experiences. It is always a mixture. If you are going to music, for example, and me as an Austrian, we are convinced we are the country of the music and nowhere else, and so on and so on. In reality, it's a mixture. I give you one example because it's the 200th years birthday of Franz Liszt, Liszt Ferenc. Hungarian rhapsodies are very famous and other melodies for sure. He was born in a village which is now Austria, which was before Hungary. His father was written L-I-S-T. He was a genius not only by piano playing and composing, he was a genius also in PR. He added in his name L-I-S-T, a set that sounds Hungarian. He was never able to speak the Hungarian language, which is extremely difficult, by the way, because it's totally different from other European languages. But he was campaigning in this because in his music, the Hungarian background of folk music is playing a very important role. But he was living, for sure, a little bit in Hungary. He was living in Germany, and he is buried in Bayreuth, where Richard Wagner was at home. He was living in France. He was living in Italy. He was really European. I think that's very typical for art and for artists, and I think that's an extremely good sign. So far, my Hungarian friends are now campaigning with Liszt Ferenc, as it's said in Hungary. The University for Music in Budapest is Liszt Ferenc Academy. For sure, I think they're saying it's one of ours. But on the other side, I think he is possessed by everybody in Europe because the musical background is extremely important, which he developed on his way. Here you can see how this creating of identity for the nation state, but in general, I think is quite necessary to create some interest also for tourism. I think I'm asking you not to understand tourism. I think you are looking there, oh, okay, it's nice, where the best good food, or is there a nice hotel, and so on and so on. I think also to get a message, what is at home in this country, was it at home in these people living there, what is their background, what is their contribution to the human development, because we can also be asked what is our contribution to the human development. That's a little bit the philosophical background of this situation. And so far, I give you the example of the Balkans. It was for a very long time dominated by the Ottoman Empire, a strong influence of the Habsburg Empire, Austria-Hungary, a strong influence by the Tsarist Empire, and it was a horrible battlefield always. I think all the wars, First World War, for example, started there in Sarajevo, a pretty well-known place for political difficulties, maybe also by the mixture which here for sure is existing. They were put together in Yugoslavia, but Yugoslavia falling into parts. Now separation is coming up. I think the majority of the Yugoslavs spoke different languages, but quite similar. The difference between the Serbian language and the Croatian language is not a very big one. But the Serbs are writing Cyrillic, like the Russians, and the Croats are writing Latin. And there's other kind of a dialect, and so on and so on. I had to do political conferences and also conferences of universities, research, and so on and so on. It was really boring, I may tell you, because they were all asking, we need our own translation booths. Huh? So far we had always 3 booths, Serbian, Croatian, Bosniak. Huh? And if there was a break, I was always making a joke chairing these meetings. So now we have break, but you don't need any translation. You can drink coffee together. Huh? Without any problem, and they were able to speak to each other. Huh? I think it's even going to crazy things. As a Viennese, I'm a strong coffee drinker, and so far I'm totally aware that Turkish coffee plays a very important role. And the coffee has come from Ethiopia through Yemen and so on, and by the Ottoman Empire in our area. You have one difficulty. If you are going to Greece, I'm asking you, never ask for a Café Turk, because it's Café Elleniko. It's Greek coffee. And I'm warning you, in Serbia it's Café Srpska, and the Croat, and. Huh? But it is coffee, and it's quite the same coffee. Here you can see the request of national identity. A Bulgarian movie maker, a lady did an excellent movie. I will never forget it. She was traveling around in the area with one melody. And this melody is present in all these countries with a different text. And she was going around and, do you know this melody? Yes, it's ours. And only we are able to sing this, and we know this. Huh? And then he was going to the next country. That's our melody. The others are never able to do this. Huh? I think here I'm asking you to look to interconnectivity. That's also the background of tourism. It's not necessary to ask what is different from the others to us. I think it is better to raise first the question, what is in common? I think this is an obligation for the humanities, I think, to develop it. We have our experiences on the Balkans in our neighborhood, because I'm always saying not only the empire is striking back, history is also striking back. I think the lot of nonsense by explanation through history which is existing in Europe is really horrible. Winston Churchill, famous politician, especially around the Second World War, said always about the Balkans have too much history as they can consume. May I say for my Europe has too much history as we can consume, because it plays always a very important role. Everybody is putting in argument history. For example, the majority of the Austrians are not very much in favor of the Turkish application to the European Union. What is running around? There were 2 sieges of Vienna of the Turks. Okay, when had this been? The first was 1529, 26, and the other one was 1683. I think it was not yesterday. It's quite a time in between here existing. History is used often in a very silly way. Huh? My counter-argument is we are owing the Turks the knowledge of coffee. That's a strong argument as a siege which has been 300, 400 and more years here ago. It's a cultural contribution, I think, not only depending on Turkey and so on and so on. I think this is one of the backgrounds which you should consider. I have to beg your pardon, I'm a little bit a contrast program to whatever you heard, but maybe a political and philosophical view on this situation of the presentation and what is said here and what does it mean is quite necessary, because you are responsible for diplomacy. And diplomacy is not this what is presented now by WikiLeaks. I think that's not very interesting, and it's giving an impression which I always had of the so-called official documents. Diplomacy is, I think, getting a certain empathy to the other, and compassion, I think, to know something by him. And I think this is especially an obligation of the younger generation. May I say, we had made mistakes enough. It's up to you to make less mistakes as we did. I wish you all the best for this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Busek. I'd be happy to take one or two questions or comments from the audience. If you'd like to ask Dr. Busek, feel free to raise your hand, and then also, as always, introduce yourself briefly before you ask the question or make a comment. Yes, okay.
Thank you. My name is Mohammed, again from Iraq. Quick question. You touched base on the national identity, and you mentioned about the Balkans, how their identity is changing from, the Serbs then changing smaller to smaller. Can you explore more about what is the national identity? How come someone identify themselves as a nation? What is it? Is it language, the people, the culture, or is it a mixture of all? Thank you.
It's a mixture of all together. I think language plays a certain role, but I think not a dominant one. I'm an Austrian. We are speaking by a great majority. We have only a Slovenian and Hungarian and a little bit of Croatian minority, but small figures. We are also speaking German. An Austrian writer said a very famous sentence, which I'm always presenting to my German friends. He said, Germany and Austria are speaking the same language, and that's the difference. I think that's a very wise sentence, because we Austrians, by tradition, and it has developed, it's not a kind of nationalism, have another way to handle the language. I think it is not only a local dialect in this sense, I think it is another approach in a lot of questions. Both approaches have to be accepted. I think that's not a kind of nationalism. And then it happened by history, because the history, in comparison with Germany, is partly different, and so on and so on. And for sure, it's by culture here existing. It is really a mixture. I think what is the most important part of identity is where I'm feeling at home. I may say by my lifetime, I grew up in a district in Vienna. My identity was from this district. Then I grew a little bit up being Viennese. And then I learned to be an Austrian, to be proud, and so on and so on. In the meanwhile, I've learned European. It was an interesting question. I had a battle with the Czech state president, Václav Klaus, who is a little bit anti-EU, against the European Union. But we agreed on one question. I was asking him, Václav, when do you feeling as a European? He answered me, if I'm out of Europe. But that's true. I think if you are out of your homeland, then you know from where you are coming. That plays a very important role. I think it's a kind of connection. I think we shall not overuse this expression of identity. I think it is a question where we have some bindings, because I think you cannot move through this world without any binding. You have a lot in. That's also connected with values, maybe with beliefs, with ideology, and so on and so on. It's a great mixture. But it is in a great change. I think if I do a comparison how I grew up and what now the thinking is, it's extremely different. And that's quite okay. It's a necessary development. But again, I would say, and I beg the pardon to all politicians, I'm a former politician, and to the diplomats, but I think in a certain way the nation state is outdated. I think we will get a movement where it is losing importance. Why? We have to solve our problems maybe on the European continent and for sure globally. Because the nation state in the moment is totally failing. Every day with the climate catastrophe, where's the nation state? Can I as an Austrian decide no wind going, and I think nothing is dirty, but it will not work. And the financial markets crisis has a great importance showing that there is an interdependency. I'm always admiring the G20 because they are convinced they can decide for the whole world. They were looking to the tax oasis here, where we are paying less taxes and can go around with the money and whitewashing and so on and so on. The first list which they presented, it was the influence of the British Prime Minister Brown at this time. The famous tax oasis of Jersey Island and Isle of Man, the city of London is living at it. They were not in this list. Okay, it's easier to list it up and to write Liechtenstein. Okay, because Liechtenstein is not connected with a stronger power within Europe. But against the British Prime Minister, nobody wanted to do it. But money laundering and so on is happening there. Don't forget Delaware in the United States and so on and so on. I think here you can see globalization on the one side with all the possibilities, how we can do the things, and what is left of the nation state, it is protecting the wrong things.
Busek, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think there we do need to stretch our imaginations even more to think beyond the nation state and really accept this interdependent world in which we're in. So I don't know if your prediction will come true, but I certainly think this idea of the nation state certainly needs to be revisited with careful thought and also creativity. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please join me in a very, very warm thank you to Dr. Busek. Thank you.
Okay. I'm leaving them.